Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video we will be looking at AQA Alevel Psychology 2021 Paper 1 Examplar Answers for Memory, which you need to know for AQA Alevel Psychology. I hope you enjoy this video and find it helpful. Let's get started. Please note that these answers have been produced with knowledge of the mark scheme but have not been approved by the mark scheme themselves. There are 3 assessment objectives, AOs, in psychology. In this video they are color-coded. AO1 Knowledge, purple. AO2 Application, blue. AO3 Evaluation, red and green. Question 1. Apart from the central executive, name and briefly outline 2 other components of the working memory model. 4 marks. Phonological loop, PL, processes auditory, speech-based, information and preserves the order in which the information arrives. It is divided into phonological store, which holds words that are heard, and the articulatory control process, which allows for the maintenance and rehearsal of acoustic information, e.g. repeating sounds or words in a loop to keep them in the working memory while they are needed. The capacity is thought to be 2 seconds worth of what is said. Confusions often occur with similar sounding words as the coding is acoustic. Visuospatial sketchpad, versus, processes visual information through the senses or visual long-term memory, patterns of recognition and spatial information consisting of the relationship between things and perception of movement. It is divided into the visual cache, which stores visual material on color and form, and the inner scribe, which deals with spatial relationships, rehearsal and the transfer of information from the visual cache to the central executive. The capacity is limited and, according to Baddeley, 2003, is about 3 to 4 seconds. Question 2. Evaluate the central executive as part of the working memory model. 4 marks. A limitation of the WMM is that the central executive, CE, is of a vague and untestable nature. The CE is often described in broad terms, such as attention, without clear delineation of its specific components or mechanisms. This lack of specificity makes it challenging for researchers to design precise and targeted experiments that can accurately assess the functions of the CE. Furthermore, there is case study research to suggest that it is not just a unitary store. Esslinger, 1985, conducted a case study on patient EVR, who had a cerebral tumor removed. While he performed well on reasoning tasks suggesting his CE was functional, he struggled with poor decision-making skills suggesting some elements of his CE was partly damaged. This is a limitation because it suggests that the central executive may not operate as a singular entity, but rather consists of multiple components that can function independently. This complexity makes it challenging to fully understand and assess the central executive's role within the working memory model, as evidenced by the case study of patient EVR, which indicates that different aspects of the CE can be affected by neurological damage. Natasha had studied a lot for her A-level drama performance, mostly practicing lines from a play alone in her room. However, once on stage in front of her teacher and the examiners, Natasha struggled to remember her lines. Instead, she kept quoting lines from a different play she had once learnt for GCSE. Question 3. Discuss retrieval failure and interference as explanations for forgetting. Refer to Natasha's drama performance in your answer. 16 marks. Interference suggests that forgetting occurs when 2 memories conflict, compete, interfere with and disrupt each other, resulting in a forgetting of one or both memories or a distortionate confusion in memory. It is more likely when the information is similar, response competition. It makes a memory harder to locate even if it is available. Retroactive interference is when new, recently learnt information interferes with and disrupts the recall of previously learnt information. For example, when you learn your new mobile phone number but are unable to remember your old one, when a teacher learns all the names of their new class that they forget the names of their old class. McGeoch and McDonald's, 1931, aimed to investigate the effects of retroactive interference on memory recall. Specifically, They wanted to see how learning new information that is similar or dissimilar to previously learnt information would affect a person's ability to recall the original information. All participants were asked to learn a list of 10 words, List A, until they could remember them all. After learning List A, participants were divided into 6 different groups. Each group was then given a second list to learn, List B. The second list varied in similarity to the first list. Group 1, List B was synonyms of List A, words with the same meaning as the original words. Group 2, List B was antonyms of List A, words with the opposite meaning as the original words. Group 3, List B was nonsense syllables. Group 4, List B was numbers. Group 5, List B was unrelated words. Group 6, no new list. After learning both lists, participants were asked to recall the words from List A. They found that the groups that learnt a second similar list to the first, e.g. synonyms, showed the greatest amount of interference and had the poorest recall of List A. Conversely, the groups that learned dissimilar or unrelated lists, e.g. numbers or unrelated words, experienced less interference and had better recall of List A. A limitation of McGeoch and MacDonald's study is that it lacks ecological validity, which refers to the extent to which the findings can be generalized to real-world settings. The study was conducted in a controlled environment, which is not like the environment in everyday life. McGeoch and MacDonald's study was conducted in a controlled laboratory setting, which doesn't mirror the complexities and nuances of memory and remembering in natural environments, where other external and environmental factors can affect a person's ability to recall and remember information. This is a limitation because it suggests that the results may not be applicable to real-life situations where memory is influenced by various factors, such as emotional context, distractions, or social interactions. The artificial nature of the laboratory setting may lead to an oversimplified understanding of how memory works in everyday life, ultimately questioning the reliability of the study's conclusions in reflecting actual memory processes. Proactive interference is when previously learnt information interferes with and disrupts the recall of new, recently learnt information. For example, when an old mobile phone number is recalled when trying to recall the new mobile phone number, when a teacher has learnt so many names in the past they struggle to remember the names of their new class. Keppel and Underwood's, 1962, aimed to investigate proactive interference in the long-term memory in an experiment that resembled Peterson and Peterson, 1959. Participants were asked to memorize multiple lists of consonant trigrams, 3-letter combinations, like XQJ or BKT, after varying time intervals, e.g. 3, 6, 9 seconds. To prevent rehearsal, participants had to count backwards in threes before recalling. They found that participants' ability to recall trigrams decreased as they were presented with more lists. Specifically, the first list learnt was recalled with high accuracy, irrespective of the time interval length, but recall performance declined for subsequent lists. The decline in recall was attributed to proactive interference. This means that the trigrams learnt in earlier lists interfered with the ability to remember the trigrams in later lists. They concluded that proactive interference could significantly impact short-term memory. Even with short retention intervals, previously learnt information can disrupt the recall of new information. A limitation of Keppel and Underwood's study is that the study lacks mundane realism. The study's use of trigrams, nonsense syllables, may not accurately represent how memory functions in real-world scenarios, as it is an artificial task, unlike memory recall in real-world settings, where information is often more meaningful and complex, such as names, events, or experiences, rather than random strings of letters. This is a limitation because it suggests that the conclusions drawn from the study may not be applicable to how memory works in everyday life. Natasha has mixed up and confused the words from another exam, which has caused her to forget. Interference is likely in this case because the A-level and GCSE performances may be similar. Retrieval failure, cue-dependent forgetting, suggests that forgetting occurs because information is available in LTM but not accessible due to insufficient and the absence of appropriate cues, clues, prompts and triggers. Tulving and Thompson, 1973, proposed the encoding specificity principle, ESP memory is most effective when information that was present at the time of encoding, when something is learnt, is also present at the time of retrieval, when something is recalled. If the cues available at encoding and recall are different or even absent, there will be some forgetting. They suggested that environmental and mental cues aid recall. Cues can be linked to the material and remembered in a meaningful way e.g. mnemonics or encoded at the time of learning but not in a meaningful way e.g. context-dependent forgetting and state-dependent forgetting. Context, external, dependent forgetting is where the environment for learning and recall is different e.g. room, smell, place, temperature. Memory is best when the context at encoding is similar to the context at retrieval. Godden and Baddeley, 1975, aimed to investigate how the environmental context affects recall using deep-sea divers. Divers were tasked with learning and recalling in 4 different contexts: 1. Learning on land and recalling on land; 2. Learning on land and recalling underwater; 3. Learning underwater and recalling underwater; and 4. Learning underwater and recalling on land. They found that the divers recalled 40% more words when the learning and recall contexts were the same, land-land or underwater-underwater, compared to when they were different, land-underwater or underwater-land. They concluded that the retrieval of information is improved if it occurs in the context in which it was learnt. State, internal, dependent forgetting is where the physical or emotional state of arousal for learning and recall is different e.g. mood, nervous, happy, sad, intoxication, drunk or on drugs. Memory will be best when a person's physical or psychological state is similar to encoding and retrieval. Memory is also better when a person is in a positive mood rather than a negative mood and when a person tries to remember an event that has a personal relevance. Carter and Cassidy, 1998, aimed to investigate state-dependent forgetting with a focus on the effects of drug-induced states on memory. Their study specifically examined the impact of antihistamine drugs, for treating hay fever, on memory retrieval. Participants were given either an antihistamine drug or a placebo and were asked to learn a list of words in one of 4 conditions: drug-drug, drug-placebo, placebo-drug, and placebo-placebo, and therefore learnt and recalled the words under the same state, both times on the drug or both times on the placebo, or different states, learned on the drug and recalled on the placebo, or vice versa. The drugs had a mild sedative effect, making the participants drowsy. They found that participants who learned and recalled the words in the same state, either drug-drug or placebo-placebo, had better recall than those who learned and recalled in different states, drug-placebo or placebo-drug. They concluded that recall is enhanced when the learning and retrieval states are congruent, whether under the influence of a drug or a placebo. Natasha is not in the same context as when she learnt the material for her drama exam. On stage vs in her room, Natasha is unlikely to be in the same physical, emotional state as when she learnt the material, in her room alone vs in front of the teacher and examiner. A limitation of retrieval failure as an explanation of forgetting is that Tulving's encoding specificity principle is not falsifiable and therefore lacks scientific credibility. Baddeley, 1997, criticized the encoding specificity principle as impossible to test and verify for certain, making it unscientific. If a cue aids retrieval, then it could be argued to have been encoded in the memory. However, if it does not, then it could be argued that it wasn't encoded in memory as a cue. This is a limitation because it suggests that the encoding specificity principle may not provide a clear and testable framework for understanding memory retrieval. The lack of falsifiability means that it cannot be definitively proven or disproven, which undermines its scientific credibility and raises concerns about its reliability as an explanation for forgetting. This ambiguity can lead to confusion in interpreting research findings related to memory and retrieval processes. Thank you for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more content like this. Bye.